Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel, and a quick shout out to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video, but more on them later. Most people watching this video or subscribe to this channel fall into one of 5 different categories when it comes to candle making. The first is those considering getting started with candle making but haven't really made any candles yet. Number 2, beginner candle makers, those that have made a few candles but they really are in the beginner stages. Number 3, intermediate candle makers. These are your makers that have been experimenting making for candles for a couple years now, 1 to 2 years, somewhere in that range. Number 4 is your advanced or experienced candle makers. These are typically the makers that have been doing this for several years, probably running a business, either side or full time, but they are comfortable and not new to candle making. And the 5th and final category is for those of you that aren't sure why this video popped up on your feed to begin with. If that is you, well, then hello and welcome. Stick around for a little bit longer and who knows, maybe you will find it interesting. Now, I mention all of that to illustrate that we are all at different stages of candle making. And with that in mind, I try to create content and videos with topics that are suitable for different stages. Some beginners, and then some that have been doing it for a little while, some that are more interested in business, some are doing it more for a hobby, and then there's some videos that will apply to really everyone. And today's video is no different. Today we're going to be talking about candle making supplies, tools, equipment, raw materials, software services, really a lot of different things when it comes to getting started with candle making. Now, most of the things that I want to talk about are not going to be new to your advanced candle makers, but a lot of you beginner or intermediate candle makers might find some of this information helpful. And then over time, once you've been making candles for a while, then you will graduate to some of these more advanced type of supplies and tools and equipment. Not necessarily because they're more advanced or complex, but maybe just to support greater capacity. But like I said, regardless of which stage of your candle making you're in and whether or not some of this information is helpful or not helpful to you, I appreciate all of you for being here. Now, I've broken the rest of today's video into 4 kind of subcategories. The first is your raw materials. Second will be your tools, equipment, and supplies. Third is going to be your office supplies, the things that help you run behind the scenes. And then fourth, and finally, we're going to talk about some software and services that might help you as well. First, we're going to start with raw materials. Now, this video is not meant to be a deep dive into all the raw materials you're going to need to start making candles or wax melts. We're not going to discuss waxes, wicks, containers, fragrance oils in depth in this video, but I do have several other videos that is dedicated to each one of those. So if you're interested in more specific details about those raw materials, check out those other videos, and I will also try to remember to link them in the description below as well. Today is meant to be more of an overview of the type of raw materials you need to consider using and maybe some pointers of where to get them and what to be thinking about when you're shopping for them. Now, this is one of those areas where if you've been making candles for a while or if you've already got started, you already know some of this information, so it will be just a brief recap for you. But first, it's probably best to mention a kit, a candle making kit or a wax melt making kit. Again, I've talked about a couple of them on the channel before. And the idea behind a candle making kit is to get your feet wet. See if it's something you actually enjoy doing. Do you actually even want to do this craft? It's a way to test the waters. But with that being said, know that if you hate the candle kit, it doesn't really mean you're going to hate candle making. But the inverse is true as well. Just because you loved making candles with the kit might not necessarily mean you're going to love making candles, because it is different once you start getting into actual production and scaling up a little bit. The process is different than what you would do in a kit. However, kits will give you a little taste of it, a little bit of an experience, and see if it's something that even remotely interests you. So for anyone that has not made a candle before and really not sure if they want to do this or not, this is probably the best thing to start with, is a candle kit. For those of you that are already made some candles before and already know that you want to do this, then the kit really is optional. It's more a matter of personal preference whether you want to keep testing new kits or go a different route. Because if you already know you want to make candles and you've already done a little bit of experimenting, then you may just be better served by buying some samples from different suppliers and just get to experimenting and exploring. All right, so candle kits aside, what specific raw materials do you really need to get started candle making? Well, there are really 4 materials that every candle needs, for the most part. The first is a container, some type of vessel, unless of course you're making a pillar candle or a votive candle. But again, we're not getting into all the exceptions here. For the most part, if you're making a standard traditional container candle, whether it's in a jar or a tin, some type of container is needed. Even for wax melts, typically speaking, you're going to use a clamshell container or something to hold your wax melts. So where can you find containers for candle making? Well, there are a lot of options. Now, I will try to mention some in the video description below, but again, I have talked about many in some of the other videos, and I'll try to create a resource that is a kind of a master list to help all of you out, or different places where you can find different styles of jars, different sizes, different price points, and so on. But generally speaking, any candle making supplier for the most part is going to sell candle containers and jars and tins, but you can also find them on Amazon, and you can even find them at regular like retail stores like your Hobby Lobbies and Walmarts and Michaels and things like that. Although buying in bulk or online is typically going to get you the best price. Long story short, you can find candle containers pretty much everywhere. The key is to make sure that they are usable for candle making. The second obvious one is wax. You need wax to make a candle. Wax is the fuel for the flame. It's the fuel for the candle. It's what holds the fragrance. It's what holds the color if you're using any. So I think it's safe to say that everyone here probably understands that you need candle wax. But what type of wax? That is really where the debate comes in. There are so many kinds of candle waxes. There's paraffin, there's soy, there's coconut, there's palm, there's beeswax, and then there's combinations of all those in different blends like parasoy blends and cocoa soy blends and so on. That the list is enormous. And within every one of those types of wax blends, there are hundreds of wax options that fit into that category. So depending on where you buy your wax or what manufacturer is creating your wax, then you're going to get different versions, different flavors of these waxes. So it's important to find something that suits you and what's most important to you, but to also sample and try them out. Now, I have another video comparing some common candle making waxes that people often begin with, and really I'm going to be doing an updated version of that coming soon as well. The most important part about choosing a wax is deciding what is most important to you. As far as wax suppliers, most people just go to your candle making suppliers. So Candle Science and Flaming Candle and 1617 and Lone Star and Aztec Candle Making and Wooden Wick Company. There's so many options out there. That's just naming some that come off the top of my head, but you can find candle wax almost anywhere. In fact, you can find some on Amazon too, although that's not really the place I shop for my wax. Next, of course, is wicks. Now, if you are making wax melts, you don't need a wick, but if you are making traditional candles, then of course you would want a wick. Wicks are what, of course, provides the light and the heat source, and that heat source is what creates a melt pool on the top of your wax, and that is what releases fragrance if you're using any. So wicking is obviously extremely important. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos on the channel, or really any other candle making resources, you'll learn quickly, if you don't already know, that wicking, it can be the most challenging part of making candles. Similar to waxes, there are so many different kinds of wicks because different manufacturers make different wicks for different purposes. Some wicks just work better with different types of waxes. If you purchase wicks from your suppliers, your candle making suppliers, they can recommend with wick guide charts which wicks tend to work better with which waxes, and at least give you a starting point. Now, if you're just making candles for light or for aesthetics, then you would basically be done there. However, most people making candles are also making candles for fragrance throw. We want to smell something nice when we're burning a candle. So if that is the case for you, then you're going to want to look at candle making fragrance oils. Now, be careful when you're looking for fragrance oils because you need to choose ones that are meant specifically for candle making. You don't want to purchase oils that are water-based or alcohol-based, or any other oils that really aren't made for candle making. They can be dangerous, but also just ineffective. When shopping for fragrance oils, similar to wax and wicks, there are hundreds of options. Actually, there's many more when it comes to fragrance oils. We're talking hundreds of thousands of options. There's a candle scent for almost anything, and all suppliers and manufacturers make different ones. So the sky is the limit with fragrance choices, and you got to be careful when you're starting out because you can easily become addicted to buying fragrance oils because that is the most fun part of making candles. The only other thing I'll mention is really optional, and that is candle making dyes. If you do want to color your candles, like you'll see behind me, I've got some that are dyed here, and then on the other side, I don't dye them because they're in an opaque jar. And so depending on what type of candles you want to make, if you want to add color, then of course you'll need some candle making dyes. You don't want to use crayons, you don't want to use soap making dyes, you don't want to use food coloring, you want to use dyes that are formulated specifically for candle making. You can get them in block or chip form, you can get them in liquid form, and again, it really is a matter of personal preference. Next, we're going to talk about tools, supplies, and equipment. First, I'm going to talk about the required or highly recommended options. You need a pouring pitcher. This is basically what you mix and blend your candle wax and fragrance and dyes together, and then ultimately end up pouring into your candle jars. The pouring pitcher is also useful for other things as well, which we'll talk about next. Therefore, this next option is really considered optional, and that is a melting tank. Now, there are Presto pots with little spouts on the front, which are really nice. There are digiboils if you want to step up and be able to do several pounds at the same time. And then there are full-on wax melting tanks that are used more for business purposes. Now, why Presto pots you can get for about $100 or less, and digiboils you can get for a couple $100s or less. You can even go a cheaper route for melting your wax, and that is just to also use your pouring pitcher for that. You could simply place your pitcher with the wax in it into a double boiler and melt your wax that way. So if you don't want to invest in a larger method of melting your wax, then you can certainly do it with just a pouring pot. Next requirement is a thermometer of some kind. This can be your traditional stick or candy thermometer that actually sits into the liquid, or you can use a digital thermometer. And that is what I prefer, and I will link all of these items in the description below to help you out. And so it makes it a little easier to show you what I mean. And then of course you will need some way to mix and blend everything together. So mixing spoons or stirring device of some type. I prefer these kind of baking or wooden spoons as they will blend things without introducing too much air. Some of those smaller skewers and sticks, you have to whip them around so much that they can introduce a lot of airs and bubbles while you're blending, and that's something you kind of want to avoid when you're making candles. So I prefer the spoons and just move nice and slowly. You will also need a way to measure out your ingredients, and you'll want a kitchen scale for that because everything in candle making for the most part is measured by weight, and that is your wax and your fragrance oils and so on. So you do need a kitchen scale, preferably one that can do grams and ounces. If you're brand new to candle making, you might not know this, but you certainly want a heat gun as well. You will use a heat gun for several purposes. Maybe not all the time, but randomly. It's nice to have one just in case. You can heat up a vessel if you need to with them. You could smooth out a top or the surface of your candle if you're using certain types of waxes. They can also be used to kind of repair or to remove old wax, remove an old wick. They can help remove old labels. There's a lot of things you can use a heat gun for, so it's a good investment to get from day one. You'll also need wick clips or some way to keep your wick to stand straight and centered while the candle is curing. Now you can use things you can find at your local store like bag clips or wick or safety pins or anything like that, but there's also certain devices that are made for making candles, and that would be your wick clips. There are a lot of different options here. I will link some in the description below as well, but I also am working on a solution to help others for a particular type of wick clip that I really enjoy using. So I'm working with someone to make these, and hopefully I can make these available to all of you in the near future. Fingers crossed. Rubbing alcohol is something else you're really going to need to help clean your pouring pots and other utensils as you're using them. You really want to get the old wax and old fragrance out. Just make sure that when you're using rubbing alcohol, you get all of it out and all of it dried up. You definitely don't want to make candles or add wax into something that still has a touch of rubbing alcohol in it. You want to use it, but of course use it carefully. And then paper towels. You're going to be doing a lot of cleaning up, both inside your pouring pitchers, on your work surface, wherever. So certainly invest in some paper towels or whatever you want to use to help clean up. Now I'm going to mention a few optional but very helpful tools and supplies for candle making. First is a respiratory mask. These are going to be like your 3M masks that have the filters on the side. If you work in a small confined area and you just don't have a lot of space for airflow, this can be really nice because it can help you from starting to smell fragrances all the time and everything blending together. It can maybe save you from some headaches because you're overwhelmed with fragrance. Like I said, in an area that's just not well ventilated, it's really, really beneficial. As you expand and have more space and there's plenty of airflow and ventilation, this isn't a necessary requirement. That's why it's on the optional side, but starting out, it might be something that you really want to consider. Wick trimmers. They're specifically made to trim it to the right length, and they're just really handy and they're pretty cost effective. However, it's optional because you can use other devices. You can use scissors, you can use toenail clippers. There's other way to trim your wicks. I prefer the wick trimmers because they just get the job done quickly and consistently. Glass measuring cups. This is really for measuring other ingredients besides your wax, mostly your fragrance oils. Now, you don't have to use these. You can measure fragrance oils in different ways. Some people actually do it straight into their wax on the pouring pot on the scale after they zero it out. That works perfectly fine, but it's risky because you might over pour, so just be careful with that. So if you really want to do this carefully, I would highly recommend some type of Pyrex or glass measuring cup. Plastic pipettes. These little pipettes come in handy if you overfill one candle and underfill another. You can actually just use it to remove some wax from another and complete the other jar. So totally optional, but you can get it like an entire box of say like 500 on Amazon for really cheap, and they last you forever. I would also get a calculator that you can keep on hand, like one of those large calculators. You're going to be creating recipes and working on fragrance oil loads. For example, what percentage of fragrance oil that your wax can hold. So it's a lot easier to calculate 24 ounces of wax times 9% fragrance oil or times 0.09 if you have a calculator on hand. I like to have one that's large with me in my making area. That way, if I'm working on a recipe on the spot or I just happen to forget, it's easy and quick to do it right there on the spot. Now, before we get into this next section, which is software and services, and honestly, this could have actually gone into that category itself, this is a great time to mention Skillshare, who is sponsoring this portion of today's video. So I want to take a quick minute to tell you about this great deal and how Skillshare can help you, not just if you're interested in making candles or any other handcrafts for that matter, but maybe also running a business as well. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes and members. It's a great way to learn a new skill, but also just find inspiration. The reason that I was anxious to use Skillshare myself was to improve areas that are not necessarily my strong suits or areas that I just love so much and wanted to get better at. For example, optimizing my e-commerce and my website, increasing sales. But another great example was about online marketing and advertising. Facebook ads, for example. I took a specific course by Jake Paxton called Scale Your Business with Facebook Ads, Learnings from Spending $150 million. So when I see that and I know that I'm hearing and learning from someone that has done this and spent a ton of money learning how to run ads, then you know it's a useful course, something that you can actually take away some value from. Because that is not an area I'm an expert in, and this guy is. So Skillshare is a really nice platform to learn from others who actually have experience with what interests you and what you're trying to learn yourself. Now, what was great about this particular course is it was a shorter one. It was only about a half an hour long, and it was really meant to give you a kind of good roadmap and a quick introduction, but also really teach you some effective skills along the way. Now, with that being said, there are many other courses as well, many of which I already have saved on my list to take at a later time, that go into even more detail. But that might not be for you, and so you might find completely different topics on Skillshare that might benefit you. They have this fantastic assortment of classes for candle makers or handcrafters, business classes, marketing classes, how to take better photos, run a business, create and run a website, even productivity and self-growth. Honestly, the options really are extensive. Now, while it is a steal on a regular basis, you can actually have access to Skillshare's library for 1 month for free, just to try out, take a class, and see what you think. I will have a link in the description to try Skillshare below, and the first 1,000 people that click on that link will get 1 month completely free. All right, so let's get back to the video and talk about the next section, which is software and services. These days, there are resources everywhere to help candle makers, handcrafters, business owners, and what have you. While most of that software and services are optional, most of them provide a great deal of benefit if you choose to use them. Need help with a label? There's an app for that. Need help with a logo? There's an app for that. Inventory? There's an app for that. Bookkeeping? All right, well, you get it. So let me give you a few examples. Let's start with Canva. They are great for labels, marketing, and social media. It's very easy, user-friendly. You do not have to be technical. You can quickly generate labels, business cards, help with your marketing and branding, create social media posts, Facebook covers, all that kind of thing. And it's very, very simple and easy to do. And you can even do it for free. If you want advanced features, you can sign up for their plan, but you can use it completely for free. Another example is Tailor Brands. Now, Tailor Brands is really kind of both a combination of software and services. They're an all-in-one kind of business solution. They'll help with logos and branding and even business startup. Now, Crafty Base is another example. I've talked extensively about them on this channel. If you're interested in learning more about them specifically, check out some of those videos. But Crafty Base helps with inventory, expenses, recipes, order management, and a lot more. So great piece of software. And again, you can find a link to that product in the description below. Next up is QuickBooks Online. This is what I use for my full accounting records and full bookkeeping. Now, I use this in tandem with Crafty Base. They both do kind of different things. Crafty Base is more for my internal business operations, and QuickBooks is more for kind of tax purposes and running my assets and overall accounts and bookkeeping records. QuickBooks is the most popular bookkeeping and accounting software in the world. And then finally is Shopify. You don't have to use Shopify, but that's what I use for my own e-commerce and website. Again, there are other options. I prefer Shopify because of the flexibility and the power behind it and the customization behind it. It's really all around the best e-commerce platform that I would recommend for people at this time. If you're someone that doesn't want to deal with your own website and you're more interested in having something hosted where you just upload your products and let that site do most of the marketing for you, then you can look at Etsy. And everyone is familiar with Etsy. They really own that platform, and you're really just renting their space in a way. So it's really just a different method, a different avenue, and it's completely up to you which one you want to go with. And the very last section we're going to talk about is your office supplies, or things that would help you on the business side of things. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because chances are if you're already running a business, you probably already have solutions for all of these. But I do think it's important to mention, at least quickly as an overview, just in case you're not really thinking about these type of things yet. You can come back to this video later or maybe take some notes now, just so that you don't forget some basic items that can be really helpful in running your business. The first is just a printer. Obviously, you need some kind of inkjet or laserjet printer, whether it's to print packing slips or invoices or labels or whatever. Obviously, you need a printer. I prefer a laser printer for the most part, but again, that comes down to personal preference. Product labels. Now, if you are making candles, particularly if you plan on selling those candles or giving those candles away, you're going to want product labels for your finished product. There are a lot of different options for this. If you want to print them yourselves and give yourself the flexibility of trying things and tweaking things all the time, then I would recommend online labels or Avery labels. You can buy them blank, and then you just print them at home on your own printer. However, if you want to design them and have them printed professionally by an online printing lab, then I would check out, again, Avery potentially. Online labels will do it as well, but I prefer Lightning Labels, Sticker Mule, U-Printing, and services like that. Now, when it comes to shipping printer labels, I actually like Rollo printers. They are designed specifically for quickly being able to print out shipping labels, similar to how Dyno printers work, but I happen to like the Rollo one better. It's wireless, it's really easy to use, so that's my personal preference. And when it comes to buying shipping labels, that of course is going to depend on the type of shipping label printer that you use. If you're using a standard printer, LaserJet or inkjet, you would buy regular sheets of shipping labels. But if you're using something like the Rollo printer, then you want to use the labels that come specifically for that printer. And similarly to the previous items, if you are planning on running a business and selling your products, then of course you would want some packaging options and shipping supplies. So shipping boxes, shipping tape, a tape gun, peanuts, bubble wrap, anything like that that would help you pack up your materials and ship them to your customers. I will have some of those items linked in the description below as well for you to check out. I would also get yourself some shelving, not just for supplies, but also for your finished products. So shelves like these behind me, for example, are to hold my candles, and then I have a pegboard type system to hold most of my wax melts, although I keep some on a shelf as well. And some examples of those I'll have in the description below. A product photo light box. And this is just a little kit you can get off of Amazon that helps you take nice looking product photos. So if you're gonna make a final product, it's good to have a good picture of it as well. And then you might want to invest in some thank you cards. Now you can get general ones or you can get customizable ones as well. And you can find those really all over the place, but you can even find those on Amazon really affordable as well. So as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, we're all at different stages of candle making. For those of you that are in the early or middle stages, then I hope this information was somewhat beneficial, helpful to you, and at least got you kind of thinking or inspired about the type of materials you might need to get started or to keep going. For those of you that have been doing this for a while and have your processes down pat, then I realize most of this was probably just a recap review for you, but I still hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to check out other videos on the channel that might be a little bit more suitable for your experience. But either way, I appreciate all of you for being here. Don't forget to check out the link to Skillshare in the description below, and remember that the first 1,000 people that click it will get a free month to try Skillshare for yourself. It really is a can't miss. I will see you guys next time. Thanks.